Good morning. Yes, it doesn't matter. However you, whatever order. Good morning. I'm just going to open us in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time together, for these wonderful individuals and educators who are here this morning to speak with us. We pray that through this time together, we would learn to engage with you, with your word, with each other, and with the written word out there in the world. In your son's name we pray. Amen. Over the next several weeks, Trinity Sermon Series is going to focus on children's books and how what we read as children helps to shape our morals and beliefs and our understanding of Christian theology. The class series over the next several weeks is going to focus on a number of different biblical and literary themes. We'll have other educators and professors, some who are with us this morning and some, one from Candler, one who's a doctoral student at University of Georgia, who are going to come and talk about different ways we engage with the Bible, literary genres, and specific works of literature. So to kick this off, we thought we would talk today with these incredible Trinity members and educators about what we read and why, the importance of reading at every age and why it matters. Recent studies have shown a decline in pleasure reading in America over the past 20 years. And reports show that young people rarely read entire books anymore, even in English class. So today you're going to see, scrolling behind us as we talk, book recommendations. There's a handout in the front of the room also with those same recommendations, contemporary and classical works. We've also recommended different formats, different apps you can go on for audiobooks. Public library system has wonderful access to free audiobooks. We also have a library here at Trinity where you can check out books. So without further ado, my pleasure to introduce to you this wonderful panel. Leslie Gober, retired upper school English teacher at Westminster, recently published author of Letters from Inside the Whale. Kristen Hunter, upper school English teacher at Westminster for almost 30 years, though she does not look like that. She's also held administrative roles, coaching roles, various other roles at Westminster. Whitney Woodward, early learning specialist at Westminster, also the director of teaching and learning in the lower school for pre-first through second grade. And then my husband, John Baum, upper school English teacher at Holy Innocents Episcopal School. He's also published a number of short stories in literary journals and magazines. So without further ado. Okay, friends. Before you were teachers, you were readers. What role did reading play in your own childhood or adolescence?
Because I'm the oldest one, I I've just always loved to read. My parents read to me. There were millions of books all over our house. And I was a sneak reader. But I'll never forget my dad, in 1969, my dad bought a first edition, well, not a first edition, the first copy of Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. And it was on his bedside table, and I snuck it away and went back into my bed with a flashlight and read it under the covers, just because I thought that would be a mystery, that would be fun. And it was just such a new kind of writing and a new kind of reading, and it was about World War II, which my book is about, and which my dad fought in the Pacific. And that's just one experience of reading that I've had that has stuck with me always.
Can you hear me? Do you want me to, this is my, okay. So I don't really remember life without reading. It's central to really my whole existence. And, but I would say that one memory in particular, so I grew up moving a lot. I had to make new friends. My dad was in the world of football. Our life was a little chaotic, but I was very close to my grandmother and stayed with her a lot. And one of my earliest memories of reading is when I would go to her home in Opelika, Alabama. There was not a lot to do. And one of the first things that we would do is she would take me to the library, and she would let me check out as many books as I wanted. And we would read together. And then over all those years of moving, especially during sort of tough times when I felt like I was the new kid once again, I really relied on and came to find reading as a source of kind of understanding. And to this day, you know, I can read a new book and it helps me figure out what I think about the world or what I understand about myself. So I don't really understand life without reading, I guess is how I would say it.
My experience is kind of very similar. Is this one on? All right, thank you. So I grew up with a family of readers. Parents always had a hardback book if it was after a birthday or a Christmas. Other than that, library books and paperbacks with broken spines. And my mother's one out of 9 in Omaha, Nebraska. And we would go to, I grew up here, but we would go to Omaha 2 weeks in the winter, 2 weeks in the summer. And when you went there, you read. We all read, just readers all flopped all over the house, kind of like cats perched on different pieces of furniture. And that was part of what being in the family was you had a good book. And even now it trickles down with books going from aunts and uncles and cousins. When we read a good book, we write our initial date we finished in the book, and it gets passed back around to the family. And then when you open it, you can see who all has read it. And it, for me, reading is part of being in a community.
Yeah. So I was thinking this morning. I was doing these questions preparing because I was getting nervous, and I was thinking how I got into reading. It was always felt like I had. I was telling Lynn this morning, I realized a lot of my reading was magazines early on. My parents gave me Ranger Rick, and then Boys Life, and I started playing drums, and my grandparents got me a subscription to the Modern Drummer. So for about 7 or 8 years, I had a magazine in my name in our house every month coming in the mail. But I was reading during that time too, but I just never thought of it as like, I never thought, wow, I'm a great reader. I just enjoyed it. The books that I remember reading, Pippi Longstocking, there's a guy, a Canadian writer named Gordon Corman, who wrote his first novel he wrote in 8th grade, I think, What's Happening in Donald Hall. My 4th grade teacher read that to us, and even though I didn't much care for her, I liked the book. And that really changed me. And then How to Eat Fried Worms was another one that I remember reading actually in church. Some of my parents saw Keep Quiet. But I've always been reading, and then just sort of grew and I hit certain milestones, like we talked about, like I hit Pat Conroy, and then went to school and tried the, my big boy pants on the Faulkner and all that kind of stuff. So I can't imagine life without reading. And the role it plays in my life now is essential as it always has been. So probably more so.
Well, that segues us into our next question, too, which is great. What role does reading play in your life now? An example, if you have.
Well, I teach people like your daughter, and so it's really my life's work. And like I said before, but we'll maybe get into some of that later, I would say that now I really see like a new book can catch me by surprise. Like if I'm sort of getting in a rut with my teaching, or if I'm sort of in the doldrums myself, I can come across a new book. And that happened this year. If I had to pick my favorite book of the year, one of them would be Frederick Bachman's My Friends. And I highly recommend this book. And I can open a new book right now. Like I've read a lot, and some books, I was stunned by his ability to write about teenagers in a way that I had not encountered much in literature. And so in that instance, a book can be such a source of energy and inspiration to me. And one of my close friends, who's also an English teacher, was in Italy at the time, and I just had to immediately tell her about this book. And then she read it, and then she recommended it to another colleague. And so immediately we were drawn to this new topic. So as someone who's aging, and you know, we can all have those times when we're getting kind of lacking energy or something, like a book can really give me profound energy, and I can feel inspired in a way that I couldn't anticipate, and be amazed by one author's ability to describe, in this instance, human beings with whom I spend an incredible amount of my time, teenagers. I teach 11th and 12th graders. They are a very particular group of people. I think sometimes they get a bad rap. I tend to think they're fascinating, and I feel lucky to spend my time with them. And he describes them in this book in a way that I just couldn't, I was stunned. And then I gave it to my mother. So in a lot of ways now, it can be very energizing in a way that not much else is.
I was going to say everything Kristen said would be me, so I get to say something else. Just put that with me too. I actually taught Whitney's husband when he was a sophomore in high school, so I taught Annika's father.
So she's been
Now
great
she's teaching.
for a generation plus.
Anyway, I would say that playing in my life now as a retired person is a very different experience, and as an older person. Most of you are not that old, but older than you. Anyway, I am finding the reading of books at different ages to be a different experience. And so I can read the same book at one age and then read it again and again. And I will say that Ted, Whitney's husband, I'll never forget this, and when I remember somebody's essay, you know it was really good. He was in the 10th grade, and we were reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and he wrote an essay that was about Huckleberry Finn joining the Confederacy Army in the Civil War. Now that is imagination. That is a really
I'm hearing this for the first time.
Okay. See, that's what happens. So I read for a lot of reasons. I read for pleasure. I read for escape. I read to satisfy curiosity, to take an adventure in different places, which is the book I'm reading now. And I think I have a T-shirt. I don't usually wear it because it's I don't know. So many books, so little time, and that's just so true. And there's so much out there that is available to us, no matter what age we are. And I really recommend thinking about rereading a book that you really liked many years ago and read it again and see what you get. And I also recommend book clubs, because the conversations that you can have with students, colleagues, friends is just, and we have a book club here at Trinity. So there are lots of ways to discuss books with other people. And things that other people see in a book is so remarkable that it's the idea of being in a classroom or a living room is sharing all these different perspectives, because people see different things, and that's pretty fascinating too, about who we are as human beings.
I feel so fortunate to work with younger children, to have older children, and then be a reader myself, because I feel like I get to appreciate that spectrum of readers professionally, and then with my home life as well. I read aloud a lot, as one can imagine, with the age students that I'm lucky enough to work with. And one way that reading aloud, speaking of rereads, the questions that children ask, the way that they make sense of the written word, changes constantly. We've done a big study on our literacy curriculum at Westminster, kind of emptying out our literacy closet, if you will, and Marie Kondoing all of the right things to make sure we're are doing everything that we need to do to make sure our children are thriving readers. But one piece that came out of the audit that a woman that came and did some professional development said, we talk so much about love of reading, which I assume everybody in this room appreciates that term phrase. But she talked a lot about love of content, and that has really changed a lot about how I think about reading, where when we teach writing for young children, we want them to know that they can tell a story or they can tell someone how to do something, and writing is the medium that gets them there. So it kind of provides that incentive to learn to be a better writer so that way your ideas come across clearly. And I love that idea of reading. You want to know what's in the book, and the reading is the medium that gets you there. So with reading in my life now, I feel like I think about it constantly. It's part of my job. But then in my personal life, I read out loud or read out loud to my children as long as they let me. My youngest is now in middle school, and just sharing again that piece of community that reading is, talking about great books. I talk with my sisters about what we're reading constantly, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. My mother only reads biographies, so that always gets me some good recommendations there. And my mother-in-law prefers novels, so I've got great recommendations there. So it's a way of connecting.
Yeah, reading in my life, I see it as a fuel almost for my own work. Lots of times if I'm trying to write something that's not working, I'll pick up something off the shelf and read a few paragraphs. But Leslie said that about the same book hitting differently, and that for me is Catcher in the Rye. I teach freshmen, and I reread that book every year, and there's always something in there that blows my hair back. And I love watching the kids wrestle with it, because at first they didn't. I don't know if we're going there in this conversation.
That's the next one.
Okay. But
Next will be, what role do you see reading play in the lives of your students?
that's a great question, Lindsay. So when I first started teaching Catcher years ago, I was floored by how the kids didn't like it. They found Holden Caulfield to be annoying. And one of the comments was, "Why doesn't he just take his meds?" And I was like, no. And so I sort of came up with a way to set it up, to scaffold it. And what I do is we have a conversation that it's all questions I throw out. What annoys you the most about the adults in your world? Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, coaches, whatever. And it's free for all, right? I'm on the board, and it's all the stuff, we probably complain about with our parents. And then what do you like about them? And then I do the same thing with their generation. What annoys you about your generation? And it's amazing how easily they can pull out all the stuff that bothers them about their world. And then I say, what's the great things about your generation? And so then we jump into the book, and I say, Holden is you. It's just 19, late 40s. And it actually, it's been a nice shift in their thinking, but I've had seniors come back and say, matter of fact, beginning of this year, one young lady came to me and said, I reread Catcher this summer, and I loved it. And which I like, because when I taught her as a freshman, she hated it. So that's a victor. Yeah, that was fun.
I remember one of my post-Catcher in the Rye experiences was as a 17-year-old when I read it. I was Holden's age, and I didn't really think about the context of his life. It was post-World War II. His older brother had gone to fight in the war, and he came home a totally different person. His younger brother died of leukemia, and he was just bereft, and his parents sent him off to boarding school, and after he tried to escape, and they'd send him to another boarding school, and a lot of people, even David Brooks, the journalist, called Holden Caulfield a whiner. And I wanted to go, oh my gosh, do you think about the life that he lived as a young person? But now, as a grown-up, I have some sympathy for the parents. I used to think they were horrible parents because they sent their child away when he needed them. And I realized they had suffered a major loss as well. And there's all these different ways that you can see things. But again, in a classroom and with students who have observations that other kids need to hear, it just changes the whole reading of a book. So I had a student, another student who, this kind of goes to I think we're gonna get here with the AI, and I'm retired. But, I've been reading a lot about it, and it's very interesting to think about. But and all the reasons why reading an actual book. I have a former student who was just an incredible kid. We did this funny thing. I taught American Studies with a history teacher, and we decided to read Moby Dick in a day. Thank you for laughing. So to show how we realized how ridiculous it was, I put out bowls of goldfish for their snacks, and I was playing ocean sounds in the background. I mean, just to show. But what I did is I selected passages from the book, and we're going to read some passages from our books, that would show them the characters, the voice of Ishmael, the language, the story, the environment of a whaling ship. I mean, and all the different things that were going on there. And so one of my students went home. It was right for Thanksgiving when we did that. It was sort of like, what else are you going to do when your kids are getting ready to have a break? And so this guy went home and read the whole thing over Thanksgiving weekend. He is now a doctor, but he is so in love with literature, and he can mix science and literature and humanities, and I'm just saying, humanities matter.
Well, to add to that, I always tell I teach through discussion. Like, I don't go into a classroom and give a lecture on a book. And so one thing that I tell my students is I want you to read in order to be able to interpret something difficult and to think for yourself. And that's where AI gets to be difficult. My juniors, including Annika, read Jane Eyre. Like, this is a big book. And they don't all love it. Some grow to love it. But what I tell them at the end, whenever we finish a big book, that day of class, I say, let's have a round of applause. If you read the entire book, then you should feel very proud of yourself. And even if you are not a humanities kid, it is an intellectual exercise that will prepare you to think about any number of difficult things. But I write a lot of college recs, and I have the kids fill out a questionnaire, and one is, what is a book that was initially difficult for you or you didn't like and your opinion changed? And I'm thinking right now of a young man who I taught several years ago, and he was very skeptical of this book, and he got so into it. And one of my most beloved days as a teacher, as I walked in and the book was due a couple days later, and this is, if you think of like big Westminster football player, this is this guy. And I walked in, the book was going to be due in a couple days, and I heard him say, well, I finished it because I really had to see what was going to happen at the end. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And he grew to appreciate and have opinions about something that initially he thought had nothing to do with him. And so for me, that is so valuable. Does that always happen? No. Even kids who begrudgingly, complete the book, it still, I would argue, serves them. And I've had a couple of kids in the last few years who were absolutely STEM kids, but they say that working through a novel really helps them to understand how to think and also how to sustain thinking. And that's what worries me about AI, because it's a quick fix. It's thinking for you so that you never learn how to think critically for yourself. And that's the thing that really has me concerned.
I see reading in the lives of my littler students, it is giving them the keys to the kingdom. When they see themselves as readers, the sky's the limit for all of them. When we think about reading, especially with young children, going kind of in that 4 to 7 range, it doesn't go in a linear path. Like all points of data, they can skyrocket with improving their reading, working on vocabulary, background knowledge, and then plateau for a little bit and then skyrocket again. And that's one of the most exciting and most frustrating parts about teaching younger children to read is they are human and are hard to predict. But especially when we find out learning differences with children and finding ways for them to embrace that and learn how to find their superpower to see themselves as readers. So I guess the role reading plays with my particular students is seeing them gain this independence. We talk a lot about when students see themselves as competent, it builds confidence. So it's really seeing them kind of step into this new version of themselves as a reader, because if you think about anything else connected with kind of basic literacy, they can't read word problems in math unless they have reading comprehension. They can't understand a how-to manual unless they have reading comprehension. They can't understand the feelings with Harry Potter characters unless they have reading comprehension. So it really is watching them get this incredible gift that will serve them for their whole life. So if you ever want to work in an elementary school, recommend, because this is just the most exciting thing to see ever with students.
It's funny you say that, because one thing that I'll do the last few years is kids will talk about how they'll read something and they don't remember any of it. And I'll say, all right, what was your reading environment like at your house? Tell me about it. And they'll say, I was in my bedroom on my bed laying down. I said, what time is it? 11:45. Okay, well, it's 2 or 3 problems right there. I'll say, I'll ask them, how close was your phone to you? I was like, it was right there. I was like, okay, what else? And they'll tell me, and say, all right, well, what you probably would be better for you is to, put the phone away, so we're quiet, maybe a little earlier. But what I was starting to do was, all right, let's just have some fun. Today, relax, sit on the floor, anywhere in the room but my chair, take the book that we're reading, and I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to put on some white noise, whatever, for about 25, 30 minutes. We're just going to read. Oh, Mr. Baum, I don't want to do this. Just trust, all right? And it's amazing. Like, after just a few minutes, they're all engrossed.
Totally.
And it's like, it's that classic moment where, like, all that stuff, like, that the kids have, that, the little ones, when they read, they're engrossed immediately. The high schoolers, you kind of have to push them into it. But once they're into it, they're into it. And their comprehension, it skyrockets then. And I say, let's recreate that at home. And so that's one thing I've been trying to do to help them get through books like, these, and to get to the point where they want to read those books. But it's fun to watch. I love those days.
Yeah, I can jump in and say, I feel like now I have to create time in class to read. It is really tough for our kids who are so busy to do the reading, so we do the same. And sometimes I'll say, let's read for 20 minutes, and then we'll move on. And the 20-minute mark will hit, and I'll look around the room. All their phones are put away, and everyone is reading, and I just don't want to make a noise. It's quite remarkable. Like, if all the distractions are set aside, I think that's when actually students realize, oh, I can actually read this. But it's a challenge with time, obviously.
What's funny about that is I'm the same way. Like, I've got to put all my stuff away. I'm worse than the kids on some level.
Yes.
So, I put my phone, in a box or whatever.
So thinking about that and becoming engrossed in something, I know a few of you brought a passage you want to read from a book. I'd love for you to give us a little brief story time here.
Ready?
Listen, yeah.
Okay. I really thought about this when we talked about this, and I was going to I had all these different ideas, and I just started reading this book, and I went, oh my gosh, this is perfect for what we're talking about. It's called The House of Doors. And I'm just going to read an early passage that came in it, and to explain how and why I love the idea of traveling with authors and characters. I see them all as traveling companions, and the best of them are like real people, sometimes more real than people I know. No offense, but you know what I mean? I mean, you're getting not only you see them and you observe them and you think, oh, I really like that person for doing that, or thinking, but you don't get their interior life. You might a little bit in the conversations, but it's, an author can create an interior life for all these characters, and you just want to go, oh my gosh, where do you connect? Where do you not connect? Where do you feel with and where do you feel against different characters that are almost more real than people we meet every day, just because we have this ability to get into their lives. So this is a passage early in the book, The House of Doors. And I would say there's windows that you can look out of, but you're still inside. Doors you open and you go somewhere else. And I think that's a really neat metaphor that I think he's using here. This is Tan Tuan Ang, And he's been on the Booker shortlist for most of his books. This is a female narrative voice, and then there's another voice, so there's all these different characters. On the large map pinned up in his study, the lower shores of the Great Karoo lie about 150 miles to the north of Doornfontein, which means something fountain. This is in South Africa. But there were days when I felt it was much closer, and I was convinced I could sense its timeless silence reaching out from the deepest heart of the desert. Its stillness, its infinite emptiness. It called to my mind a story I had once heard. A pair of explorers, husband and wife, had got lost during an expedition across the Gobi Desert. To hide their growing despair and feelings of hopelessness as they wandered deeper and deeper into the desert, they stopped talking to each other. I often wondered which of the two was more oppressive, the silence of the desert or the silence between the husband and wife.
You can get, we don't have to go always into that.
Sure? Okay.
I mean, I have several things I could read.
I know, I have several things too. So one of my favorite short stories to teach is, and I want to do some contemporary, some good contemporary stuff, but is Araby. It's a James Joyce story. It's very, I'm sure there's a lot of complex Joycean things happening, but I love, when I sell it to the kids, I say it's a story about a guy who likes his friend's older sister. Because that's, whatever. And so he goes, he likes her, and he says he's going to buy her a gift. But there's a paragraph in there that I use in class, and I love just because the way the language shifts over the course of the paragraph. It goes from, it's Dublin, it's the late 1890s, it's dark, it's winter, but it shifts as the young lady makes her appearance. And but it's Joyce, and it's readable Joyce. It's not Ulysses. So this is basically describing he and his friends playing. It's very anyway. When the short days of winter came, dusk fell before we had well eaten our dinners. When we met in the street, the houses had grown somber. The space of sky above us was the color of ever-changing violet, and towards it the lamps of the street lifted their feeble lanterns. The cold air stung us, and we played till our bodies glowed. Our shouts echoed in the silent street, and this next line floors me. The career of our play brought us to the dark, muddy lanes behind the houses, where we ran the gauntlet of the rough tribes from the cottages to the back doors of the dark, dripping gardens where odors arose from the ash pits, to the dark, odorous stables where a coachman smoothed and combed the horse or shook music from the buckled harness. When we returned to the streetlight from the kitchen windows and filled the areas, if my uncle was seen turning the corner, we hid in the shadow until we'd seen him safely housed. Or if Mangan's sister came out on the doorstep to call her brother into his tea, we watched her from our shadow peer up and down the street. We waited to see whether she would remain or go in, and if she remained, we left our shadow and walked up to Megan's step resignedly. She was waiting for us, her figure defined by the light from the half-open door. Her brother always teased her before he obeyed, and I stood by the railings looking at her. And here's the shift. Her dress swung as she moved her body, and the soft rope of her hair tossed from side to side. Stop it, it's unreal.
So I brought in, I don't even know if I added this to our list, but one of my most important books is Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And when we, in the junior year at Westminster, we teach like a big book, and then we have something that we put in relationship to it. And for this one, we actually put the kids into different reading groups, and they have a discussion of the book with just 4 people. So after Jane Eyre, I have 3 different books going in my class. One of them is Their Eyes Are Watching God. And Hurston was a black writer in the 1930s, a member of the Harlem Renaissance, which was a time with an explosion of black artists. And she writes about Eatonville, Florida, which was a county that was inhabited by all black citizens, and writes this. Hurston herself was a writer and an anthropologist and really wanted to celebrate the culture of these people. And the main character, Janie, goes through all, enormous trials. And this is a bit of a spoiler, sorry, but at the end of the book, she's on her own. And really the book consists of her talking to a friend. So through stories, she kind of lifts her friend up and talks about the way that she has survived profound tragedy. And so I thought I'd read a little bit of this. And she begins with some dialect. And the other thing, so this year, one of my groups consisted of 4 boys who were reading this book, and they did a great job with it. And I check annotations. One thing we talk about is that when you read, you don't just read passively, you actually write in your book. And some of the kids drives them crazy, but they learn to do it. And so I picked up one of the boys' books and I turned to the last page, and after it, he wrote, "Wow, what a great book." And he had done really well with it. And my own daughter's annotations are in this one. I found this, and which is really lovely. But near the end of the book, the main character, Janie, is talking to her friend Phoebe and sharing all these stories. And she says, "It's a known fact, Phoebe, you got to go there to know there. Your papa and your mama and nobody else can't tell you and show you. 2 things everybody got to do for themselves. They got to go to God, and they got to find out about living for themselves." And then Phoebe gets kind of inspired by this. And then at the end, you hear some of Hurston's writing is incredibly poetic, and she kind of captures the end of this character's life after she has lost her husband. She's gone through really enormous loss, but she has a sense of sort of power and resurrection at the end. And this is the final paragraph. "The day of the gun and the bloody body and the courthouse came and commenced to sing a sobbing sigh out of every corner in the room, out of each and every chair and thing. Commenced to sing, commenced to sob and sigh, singing and sobbing. Then Tea Cake," that had been her husband, "then Tea Cake came prancing around her where she was, and the song of the sigh flew out of the window and lit it in the top of the pine trees. Tea Cake with the sun for a shawl. Of course he wasn't dead. He could never be dead until she herself had finished feeling and thinking. The kiss of his memory made pictures of love and light against the wall. Here was peace. She pulled in her horizon like a great fishnet, pulled it from around the waist of the world and draped it over her shoulder. So much of life in its meshes. She called in her soul to come and see." And this book really, it has that language, and then she has dialect of her characters, and it's a one-of-a-kind book that I return to again and again.
I forgot my book, I'm sorry. But one of the books that I put on the recommendation was Maggie Smith's "You Can Make This Place Beautiful," which, full disclosure, is an autobiography, but she's a poet, so I hope, I beg forgiveness. But one of the lines in there, my daughter got into birding in middle school, going along with her hiking in Manchester, living her best life. And the author, Maggie Smith, is going through a divorce. She's got children she's trying to go through, and these moments of reflection where she's finding the world through a new lens. There's just one line where she shared, "Imagine if you didn't know birds exist and you thought each tree had its own unique song." I was like, oh my gosh, right? I know. I mean, what a powerful way to be going through something so life-changing and to still find beauty in the simple parts of nature when you take apart what you think you know about it. I just love that so much. So I shared it with my daughter and her birthday.
Thank you. So the next, as aware of our time drawing to a close, I'm going to sort of launch some compound question here that I think hopefully might sort of feed into each other. Curious to know why it matters that we read and write stories in the first place. The notion of kind of how does it help us develop empathy? In a way, why is it so important in educating young people, and what we risk losing if we don't read, if we don't make sure that young people are reading and that we ourselves are engaging in this practice. So I know that was a lot, but just however you feel moved
about reading. And I've discovered in the last 10, 15 years that a lot of the books that are really stuck with me, the books that end in hope. As dark as they are, and as tough as life is and can be, the books that I really enjoy, the ones where it's like, yeah, we're all going to go through stuff, but at the end, there is hope there. And so I think one of the important aspects of the students' reading is, especially now, because their lives are so busy and they got all this pressure and everything, is, to read the struggles of others, and that helps create empathy. It helps give them some kind of mental lifeline to the difficulty of just living. Yeah, to me, it all boils down to some kind of help. Like one of my favorite books, Libby and I talk about this a lot. Every decision the character makes is just terrible, and it's like, but it's also hilarious. And it ends with, it's one of those perfect endings where he doesn't get what he wants, but he gets what he needs. And so that's sort of a lesson that a lot of the books I think that the kids need to understand, and they will eventually. But I think I'll stop there.
Is that Financial Lives of the Poets?
Yes.
We also talk a lot. There's so many values to reading. I mean, there's multiple. We don't have to just zoom in on one, but I will say the development of empathy is right up there at the top of the list. And there's so many people who need more empathy. I'll leave it there. This is a book somebody gave me for Christmas, The Uncommon Reader. And The Uncommon Reader is Queen Elizabeth II. It's a novel. But she is walking along the property of her massive castle with her corgis. And she runs across this sort of traveling library just right there, and she tries to figure out what it is. So she goes and knocks on the door, and she goes up into the little traveling book place. And she talks to these two guys, and they say, have you ever read this? Have you ever read that? And they start giving her books, and she is just transported into the lives of her subjects in a way that she never had before, because we all know the stories about Queen Elizabeth and how she seemed cold. I mean, remember when Diana died, and yet in this novel, her reading changes her. And instead of sort of being official and formal and kind of cold and seemingly cold-hearted, and it's a novel, when she goes out and she encounters some of her subjects in Scotland or in London and all around, she knows new questions to ask them. And at first they're like, what is she doing? I mean, this is the queen. Why? And they're saying, she'll say something like, what are you reading these days? And I just think, I mean, the book is really fun. It's very short and you can read it very quickly. But that picture in my head of Queen Elizabeth and this, subject they are subjects. They are subjects of humanity. And it's fabulous. It's a neat thing.
The two stories I told about, two young men reading these two characters that have seemingly nothing to do with their lives, and then them responding to that. That's a moment of empathy. And also moments when a student realizes, I had a young man who really struggled with a lot of work at the beginning of last year, and then began to make connections in literature that were astounding, that I had not thought of. That's one of my favorite things. I learn from my students all the time. They see something in a text I've read 10 times that I never have seen that is remarkable to me. But in my attempts to help them get into a book, I tell them in Jane Eyre, and I'm not going to say too much about it because I'm talking about it in a few weeks, but early in Jane's life, many people tell her who she is. She's poor, she's an orphan, she's rebellious, she doesn't fit in, and she begins to try to find ways to be able to say who she is. And I talked to the students about that. I said, have you ever had the experience of somebody telling you who you are or thinking you are such and such, and they're dead wrong, and it's a very frustrating experience? That's the story you're reading. And they will often perk up, and they'll be like, yeah, that guy Brocklehurst, he's a hypocrite. He's this minister who comes in and he says horrible things to Jane, and he's very cruel. No wonder she rebelled against the church. So we sort of finding ways to have empathy, starting with the book, and then to talk about, I sit at a table with 15 students. Some of them, they look across the table and they think that kid's in another group, or that's some kind of, weird kid. And I'm like, we are a community in here. Let's think about perhaps what you thought of the kids around this table. So it starts with the book, but at the end of the day, I really want it to not just be about reading well, but who they are as people and their ability to empathize with maybe somebody in a social group that they think they're not connected to.
I feel like with our younger children, reading is so critical, not just for gaining more understanding about the world around them, but for deeper understanding of the world around them. You'd be shocked at the number of students as young as preschool who have their own iPads, which I have many personal feelings about, and I'll say that. But when you do see things on social media, I'm living in a house with almost 3 teenagers, and we tell them social media just shows the best parts. Social media just shows the best parts. But when you read a book with a character, you see them in your mind's eye. A character who cries himself to sleep, and a child realizes, oh, I'm not the only one. I have those feelings too. This epidemic of loneliness with teenagers that keeps getting younger and younger, how that shifts. This is a way for children to really understand that their feelings are normal, which, as awful as that word is, but these are shared pieces that everyone has, and it's okay to have this gamut of emotions. It's okay that all of these pieces make us who we are, and this is how someone has gone through all of these together. But the other piece that I really feel like I share with parents at school is that piece of sustained attention. When you read a book like Anne of Green Gables comes to mind. I remember reading that out loud with my children, and there's lengthy descriptions of Green Gables and of what the walk to school looks like, and what the train station looks like. These long passages about setting and how important that is, and it teaches them to notice things. It teaches them to look for details and how they all play a part. And if some of those details are absolutely benign, it's just put in there for the appreciation of the moment.